Hey everyone, welcome to the CyberHub Engage podcast. I am your host, James Azar. Make sure you're following us on Twitter, Facebook at CyberHub Engage, or following me directly on Twitter, James_Azar1. I have a great show for us today. We are going to be all over the cybersecurity landscape, but in a good way. I'm talking to James McQuiggan, Product and Solution Security Officer at Siemens Gamesa, right? I got
Gamesa.
that. Gamesa?
Gamesa.
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 It's very tricky.
Yeah. Well, you had it right because you said Gamesa because that's what it looks like, an easy way to spell it. But yeah.
Yeah, Gamesa.
Gamesa. So it's all good.
I want to know who the person who came up with that secondary name is.
Mr. Gamesa.
Mr. Gamesa. That explains it.
It was the merger of two companies.
That explains it all. I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, GetSmartEye. That's GetSmartEye, like your eye, EYE.com. It's a new security company that's focused on your privacy. How many of you guys have eyes around watching your screens, your phones, your tablets, no matter where you are? It can be your own office, an airport, a train station, a co-working space, and even a coffee shop, right? But there's some documents and some information that really needs to stay away from prying eyes. That's where GetSmartEye comes in. They're using the latest biometric technology to give you complete control over the documents you send and who sees them. Whether you're viewing them yourself or sending them for someone else to view them, the GetSmartEye technology ensures that whoever's seeing it is the right person. And should someone who shouldn't see it grab a look at it, it gets the document to disappear and won't reopen it until it verifies the identity of the person you sent it to. So to get more information, go to getsmarteye.com/James. Again, that's getsmarteye.com/James. Again, getsmarteye.com/James. So I don't typically have other James on the show. This is an exception to the rule.
Oh, well, thank you. Appreciate it.
James, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate your time. I know we're running a bit behind schedule because of some technical difficulties as usual. I like to say that technology, as it gets better, it also creates more challenges.
Yes, it does. Yep.
So before we get started, if you could share with us a little bit about your background and how you got started in security and so forth.
Sure. And thanks for having me on here today. This is these podcasts are a lot of fun, and excited to work with you on this. So for me, I think when it comes to cybersecurity, getting into cybersecurity, nobody ever thinks that this is where they'll end up or where they're going to work. It's always you either get pulled into it or you see an opportunity and somebody goes, hey, this is, why don't you do this more on a regular basis? And that's what it was for me. I have a bachelor's of science in IT, got it long time ago. And I was working in a organization within Siemens where we were like the OnStar for the gas turbines. We collected data. And I was responsible for those network connections, setting up the VPN connections. And in the electricity space, we have a little thing called NERC-CIP, North American Electric Reliability Corporation. They have a set of security standards. And our customers were coming to those saying, hey, are you guys NERC-CIP compliant? And my boss turned to me and said, are we NERC-CIP compliant? And so off I went and proceeded to figure all that out. And 13 plus years later, still involved in doing a lot of stuff with NERC-CIP. But that put me on the path of doing a lot more cybersecurity. Went and got my CISSP. Been a certification holder now for the last 10 plus years. I run the Central Florida chapter for ISC Squared, doing monthly meetings, networking, educating folks. It's a lot of fun. And the other passion is helping educate children, parents, teachers, seniors on how to be safe online, how to be the whole safe and secure online, cyber safety, what they shouldn't be clicking on, what they should be doing, shouldn't be doing. And that's where a lot of the passion is, and really do have a good time doing it. But the energy ICS space is constantly growing and changing, and so that keeps me on my toes for the day job.
It does. And, when you and I kind of did the first call for this podcast, I didn't want to hang up the phone. Like, if we could have just stayed on the phone for another 2-3 hours, I would have been geeking out because you really do have a lot of different points of expertise. And I kind of want to start talking about that. And we're For those listening, we're going to be all over the place. We're going to be talking about ICS and certs and education and workforce development, and we're going to be kind of all over the place. But I do want to start with all the noise around industrial control systems, because that seems to be a hot topic. And you've got, I like to call it, you have people making noise, and I don't, some noise is justified because it's really, really important.
Right.
But other noise just seems to be, I don't want to say sales driven, but sales driven. It's more of like, hey, if you don't have us, then you're going to get hacked, and you don't want to get hacked. So, right? How do we cut through the noise? I mean, how do we really secure our critical infrastructure? And what's the real state of security in ICS? I mean, from someone who's on the inside of it.
Right.
And what do practitioners and cybersecurity folks really need to know about ICS security at this time?
Yeah, ICS, the space in itself with the noise, I think no matter where you are, whether you're in IT or in OT, that operational technology side, which is where ICS falls into. There's noise wherever you are. There's people always trying to sell you things, that next widget, the blinky light machine that's going to, protect you from being hacked. But, a lot of it comes down to your people. It comes down to your processes. And within the ICS space, there is that noise. There is that concern. You could say there's a lot of FUD, that fear, uncertainty, and doubt that goes around. The news, the media loves to try and, whether intentionally doing it or trying to bring awareness of putting up, power plant got hacked, and, or our infrastructure is constantly under attack. And every company in the world is constantly under attack. Everyone's getting hit by service attacks or attempts for it. And the ICS space is no different. All the big companies that are out there, they're getting the same type of attacks coming through, and they're taking the steps to protect it. Within the ICS space, you kind of take it a little further, where now you really have to start protecting that space a lot more than you would your own corporate infrastructure. With the industrial systems, that's your bread and butter. Those are your crown jewels, your golden nuggets, your secret sauce, whatever you want to call it. You have to do a lot more to protect that. You have to restrict your users who can access it. You have to limit the traffic that's going on in there, going into that environment. You can't have your firewalls be from any source to the systems on the inside of that network. You have to know everything that's going into that environment, what the source traffic is, what the destination is, and what's actually going across it. There has to be that strong awareness within that environment. And a lot of companies, a lot of the power companies, ICS companies are taking those steps, but it's the small to medium ones that are experiencing a little more challenges because of the money and the time that it takes that have to be spent to secure these environments. You can't necessarily just bring in the IT team and just kind of secure it that way, because in the ICS space, the critical component is availability. If you're not generating power, then the lights aren't on. If you're not running the water treatment plant, then nobody's getting clean water. And so it's all about availability. And Microsoft comes out with their patches second Tuesday of every month. And, if you got to reboot your system every month, if you were to have any type of downtime, that's an unacceptable risk that these companies want to take. And for them, risk is a very big part of it, and making sure that they keep those systems up and running, they keep the lights running, because of the financial impact that if something happens, they're going to get hit, and it's going to be a big part to their bottom line.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that people don't consider in ICS is their margins are kind of predetermined by the government. They're not allowed to mark up more than a specific percentage of the service that they're providing to clients.
Sure. Right.
I know that here in Georgia, just last year, Southern Company was advised by the state to give everyone some sort of a check back, because they had made more money than they were allowed to make. So I mean, and that in a capitalist society, that seems so crazy, right? Because we claim to be capitalists, but here we are kind of making these companies give back a surplus of money if they had it for whatever reason, back to the consumers, rather than maybe reinvesting it. And you brought up a really good point, which is the small, medium, and regional players. don't always have all the resources. And that kind of leads me to the next question, right? Because internationally, the layout between, you know, nationally critical infrastructure and government is very, in some countries, governments run it. In other
Right.
countries, governments are stakeholders. So
Yep.
they have an interest in it. Here, these organizations are completely independent, either
Right.
publicly traded or privately held. So what do we need to do to enhance those small medium partnerships with government in order to really kind of fill that gap and really resolve those challenges in ICS?
Yeah, and that does bring a good point, because the government does have a lot of great programs that I think a lot of people aren't really aware of. The whole ICS CERT group themselves, which is a part of the CISA, the new CISA organization, or CISA organization from Department of Homeland. They have been working with a variety of different national labs, whether it's Idaho, whether it's Pacific Northwest, and they're coming out with different tools that are available for these small and medium business companies to use within their ICS environment. There's also a very big organization, medium to large organization that's within the ICS space, and they ended up purchasing another company just to get some of their asset identification software, and have now made that free to those small and medium businesses. Because when you have to go out and buy asset identification and vulnerability management products so that you can get a strong understanding of what's on your network, because that's the first thing that we always talk of in security, is you got to know what you're protecting. And with these small and medium business facilities, they may not really be aware that, oh yeah, there's that other laptop plugged in. I've been on site visits and visiting other power plant companies, and that was my phone, sorry. The joys of having the Mac, tied together. So when my text messages come in, it's like, oh, there, okay. So we'll take the short second there to put on Do Not Disturb. There we go. All right, so that shouldn't happen again. Could be worse. You could be in church and the phone rings, right? That's always a good time.
I've seen the videos where they come and grab your phone and answer it. Did you know that this person was praising the Lord this Sunday morning?
Oh, yeah. But yeah, so there are resources that are becoming available for these small and medium business companies. It's just a matter of being aware of what's out there. But when your IT guy, your operations manager is also your security guy, it makes it very challenging for them. But the government is coming up with a lot of different tools, as are some of the other companies that are providing ICS security as well.
Do you feel like there's going to be a kind of, I like to say, we just kind of did that in jokingly, and no pun intended, a come to Jesus moment between government and some of the most critical infrastructure about really providing government grants for security to ensure that, a local population isn't at risk from a cyber attack?
Yeah, that would be the utopia of it. That'd be awesome if they could, start taking that money instead of, these bigger companies that are making the billions of profit, being able to take that money and put it towards, helping support the smaller companies. But with, from that grant perspective, that the money's perspective, something like that would be extremely helpful for those companies. I just know that it's the time and the money and the resources, having that technology in there, and then having the time to be able to go through and be able to effectively run it and keep it going. I mean, years ago, we always used to joke that, yeah, we got a firewall, it's installed, but is it properly configured? And that's kind of the same thing, that we have to make sure that if we give certain things to these smaller companies, that they get the resources to be able to properly run them as well, whether it's managed or within their own environment.
That'd be a cool initiative for the ICS CERT to kind of take it up and try to establish a federal grant for some of those smaller and medium sized kind of players.
Sure.
To help them, because that's really a challenge is when you look at those smaller companies. And that's why small businesses are targeted more than larger corporations, right?
Yeah.
It's
the risk that they're willing to take in the fact that they haven't been breached yet.
It's also a capital issue, right? You've got, you make 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 million a year. how much really can you invest in security, because you're trying to increase your infrastructure, you're trying to get better talent, you're really reinvesting the money in better service, and
Sure.
support, security still hasn't hit it yet.
Right.
We're hearing about a lot of different technologies for ICS, and a lot of them are kind of coming out, and they're trying to elevate and secure, the entire national infrastructure. What technologies out there are you excited about, and why?
Well, there's several companies that are out there that are doing a lot of really good things, between the companies and the technology, but also what's being done for the people as well. From a technology standpoint, a lot of the OT technology is coming into that ICS space, because within the ICS space, you don't want to be putting extra traffic on those networks, because the communication that's going on is critical to the operation of the manufacturing plant, the power plant, whatever, water, whatever. Yeah. So you can't be putting extra things on. Well, now the technology is coming out where it's passively listening, and it's collecting all this information, and it's able to tell you all the systems that are on your network. It's able to draw you that network map. It's able to then tell you your vulnerabilities, what's got to be taken care of. And that's kind of fortifying on the basics, understanding what you have from a hardware level, software level, and then going through and doing that gap analysis and figure out, all right, where do we need to secure? Isolating and doing defense in depth within those environments, being able to have those different layers and having the different technologies that can work through that to support that. But then on the other side to that, you got your blinky lights, and there's that technology, AI, all the buzzwords and everything else. But the people, for me, is kind of, we're seeing a lot more people coming into the space. We're trying to get a lot more people to get into cybersecurity, and getting them into ICS cybersecurity. There's a lot of initiatives, a lot of different conferences that are out there that are doing a fantastic job in pushing people to get into the space and enticing them. I mean, with some of the conferences that I've been to already that specifically focus on energy and ICS, they do some really fantastic conferences, and they're not only just doing regular presentations, but they're challenging the speakers to think in a different way, or you submit a paper that you think is the best thing, and they'll come back with 8 questions and kind of go, how about looking at it from this angle, or tweaking it? And so they're taking the audience in mind and trying to gear it more for the audience rather than just the speaker giving their presentation. And it does provide a better environment for those presentations, and the people get a lot more back from it. Also, some of them are a little smaller, a little more intimate than you would get with like a DEF CON or a Black Hat.
Right.
Hey, the people that are attending these are anywhere between 500 to 1,000 or maybe 2,000 people. So you get an opportunity to be able to go around and talk to more people and build those relationships and connections. Because I may have a particular issue at a particular power plant that I've never seen before, but I can reach out to a network of colleagues and that I've met through these kind of conferences and events and go, hey, I'm seeing this. Anybody else seen that or come across that? Or what do you think about this? And that kind of community that's within that ICS space is very supportive and willing to help each other out. Titles and companies get left at the door, which is great.
I hate the title concept in business. I mean, I know we need it, but I'm not a big. I think one of the best business cards I've ever seen was I was at a conference and someone handed me their card, and it had their name on it, and then it had no title.
Right.
And so I asked them, I go, so what do you do? And they go, who cares?
Right. What do you need? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, does it really matter? And you're like, well, kind of makes sense. I mean, you always want to be targeted, but kind of. I'm all for eliminating titles and streamlining business. Sometimes you need that. We're starting to see new threats emerge on critical infrastructure. We saw that I think last week in Saudi, where they weaponized drones to attack kind of the fuel pipeline that was going from one side to the other.
Yeah.
The attacks on the Ukraine, taking the energy grid offline.
Yeah.
And some of that is state sponsored. Some of it is kind of testing capabilities for wartime scenarios. We saw that with the maritime, with the ships, with the underground drones in the Gulf. How do you start to build a security program to not only address some of the cyber threats, but now the weaponization of cyber in the physical space? I mean, those drones are, piloted remotely. That's a cyber threat as much as it is a physical threat.
Yep.
how do you start to look at that? I mean, those
Yeah.
complex. It's in kind of increasing the landscape of just securing my network, because if I can't get, like you said, defense in depth, you've got all these different layers.
Yeah.
I can't get you that way, but I know, I think a weaponized drone is the new DDoS attack.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
mean,
it's cheaper.
and cheaper. Yeah. I mean, you can go out and buy one of them and attach something to it and fly it into a particular area. And I think that comes into where you start working with your physical security. If you're in an organization where you have a physical security team, one of the things that I've seen done a lot is that's been successful is to have a holistic security board. You bring your product security people, or you bring your operation technology people, you bring your IT security people, and you bring your physical security people, and you bring them into a room and you start talking about that threat landscape. And when you start having drones that are coming after the gas turbine plants or fuel lines or wind turbines, you work with that physical security folks to say, okay, what do we need? What can we do to help protect that? And you start that collaboration, because they may have resources available for cameras. They may have resources for drone technology, because we're seeing like airports, right. They're going to increasingly keep those drones out of the airport and that airspace. And one of the things that gets done with the drones is they have the geofences. So now do we then start pairing up and the vendors start collaborating with the drone makers and say, all right, look, yes, you've got military bases and you've got Air Force and you've got government buildings. We need to start adding in power plants into those geofences so the drones can't fly into those areas. That's more on the consumer side, the people that are doing, behaving themselves, the people that are going to have that bad intent and want to do that.
They're going to flash the drone technology. I mean, they're going to install their own tech to it.
It's their own code, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the challenge.
It is. And I think a lot of that's going to come from, all right, how do you deal with those rogue drones in the airport, in those spaces? Do you have your own set of little drones? I mean, can you have that at these power plants? Or do you have wildlife that can help you with that? Because I know they've been training birds to take down drones. You got your eagle. They're not only keeping away the squirrels from the power lines, because those are dangerous too. More power outages are caused because of squirrels, not because of hackers. Or other ill intent throughout the year. But, whether you start looking at different out-of-the-box methodology and thought process for protecting against those drones and those physical attacks. The interesting thing with the Ukraine was they were able to recover quickly because they were able to switch over to manually. One of the big problems that we have here in the US, North America, everything is digital. It's all electronic. If we had to try and start operating a plant on manual, it wouldn't take us 45 minutes. It might take us 45 days, and it would have to be rebuilding everything. I mean, that's my number, not an actual fact.
Wow.
But, everything is done electronically. So to have to switch something over or go manual in our environment is a lot harder than it was for what they had in Ukraine, because they had more of those manual systems. They hadn't gone full digital like we have with a lot of the stuff here in the US and Europe and North America.
And this kind of takes me back to the question of, government and private sector partnership on this. Yep. It feels like, when you look at at how, bad guys are starting to address targeting OT systems, I think Iran and its proxies are writing the new playbook when it comes to physical attacks on critical infrastructure. They're doing it in Saudi. They're doing it in the UAE. They're doing it in different countries. They're really kind of going after physical sabotage to take down a digital system.
Because they can't get it electronically, so we'll take it down physically. And there's always been the fun saying of, once you can get physical access to something, well, that's it. It's game over. You've got full control. So they're taking the physical approach to disrupt and destroy for a longer period of time, rather than just try to gain access and cause a wider spread damage. They'll just go right. Sounds like they're going right to the source.
Well, I think the symbolism of it too is if you blow up a fuel pipeline with a weaponized drone, you create a stronger message of, we can get you any way. You close this door, we'll go in through this window. You close this window, we'll go in through the other window.
Yep.
And it's a cat and mouse game, but you're talking about things that are critical to save people's lives, right? Mm-hmm. Hospitals can only run so long on generators.
Yep.
People can only live so long without electricity. I mean, I'd hate to think what would happen if, you know, New York City went without electricity for 2-3 days.
Yeah, no, that would be bad. Yeah,
I mean, I can just imagine the looting that would be happening if people go into like the places going like, I need food, because no one really stacks up anymore. People don't.
Right.
I mean, I remember growing up in the 80s and 90s, you know, you always had like a closet full of canned foods with expirations that, you know, when electricity went out, you'd open a can of Spam or, you know, whatever, or tuna, and that was your food.
Well, we entered hurricane season here in Florida, so everybody's starting to stock up now on the water and the food and everything else. But you're right. Yeah. I mean, you start looking at that other attack vector and looking to target the government facilities or the power plants. You know, if it was to be something with weaponized, or they take a big truck and try and drive it through into the power plant, you know, the facilities are, you know, they're fenced off, but once you break through that first fence, you know, how many more fences do you really need to be able to protect it? You know, what kind of reaction time can you have before somebody can be out there? Or, you know, do you take into consideration that if someone were to do that, you know, when they take down that power plant or the wind turbines, that's the risk. But what's that likelihood? You know, they take that risk that's unlikely to happen or has a low likelihood. But the consequence that comes out of that, okay, and pulling those all together, they figure out, okay, you know, what measures are we going to take? And I think a lot of things here in the U.S. is all based on reaction. You know, when somebody does one attack against one way, well, now we're going to protect against that one way, but then they start thinking about coming around. I mean, our airline safety is a good example of that, shoes and belts and underwear. But from the power plant standpoint, you know, we had, you know, several years ago, there was a group of individuals that shot up a transformer and substation. So the course of action after that was, all right, now you got to put a brick buildings all the way around, or brick walls all the way around it to be able to prevent that from happening. And then they rolled that out. But that was the only instance that it ever happened. It's never happened since. Is that because of the brick, or because somebody hasn't thought else of another way to get around it by lobbing a grenade over or whatever else, you know? So it's a lot of that is that likelihood and that opportunity for that attack.
So I'll tell you a really interesting story. We talk about aviation security, right? I think airports are ultimate soft targets. I was speaking to a friend of mine who runs an intelligence agency abroad, and he's the deputy to the chief of an intel agency, and they had a few of their airports recently disrupted by drones, and they foiled some attacks that haven't been made public, but the overall scheme of it was they fly an innocent drone into the airspace, grounding all the planes, and then they can weaponize drones to go after the planes that are sitting on the tarmac with passengers, engines on, burning fuel with a lot of fuel. And if, you know, it's a busy airport with 10, 15 airliners, you know, just sitting on the tarmac waiting, I mean, you could fly in drones, and if those drones are weaponized, meaning they're carrying a 2, 3, 4 kilo explosive on it, I mean, you can't even shoot them at the sky, because, you know, if they're flying in, you're shooting at the planes. You risk, you know, firing bullets into a
and hurting, you know, then you've got casualties. Life stake.
I mean, when he kind of explained to me that scenario, I stood there in absolute and complete, I don't want to say disarray, but I go, wow. I mean, it's not that hard to do.
To do that and then execute. I mean, those are the bad people in the world that,
you know, but it's not that hard to do. It doesn't cost that much money, right? I mean, buying drones today, buying a decent drone's around $300-400. You're not talking about, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars,
right? Yeah,
and coordinating an attack like that around an airport, which is a soft target. I mean, whether you geofence it or not, I think once you overcome that software challenge and
that's where there's a little more expertise needed. But yeah, once that's overcome and you reload your own firmware on there, you don't need a lot to, you know, fluid wise, to create yourself a nice explosive. Well, nothing nice about explosives really, but but that's where within the airports they're having to create that plan that if there is a drone attack, what do we do? What can we do to counter drone attacks? And there are companies out there that are developing technology that can you know, watch for that, you know, whether they're flying in, quote unquote, under the radar. But I think with technology, finding a better way to be able to track the drones or something coming into the airport or that airspace. Because otherwise, there is a big blue and white airplane that flies all over the country. It's got its own countermeasures to prevent against that. But, what does it take to take those countermeasures either for other planes or, for the airports? That's kind of that challenge that needs to be set forth.
You brought up a really good point, and that'll help us kind of transition to our next challenge, which is a lot of companies are out there developing. There's a lot of different brilliant minds in universities doing research, and you actually also teach.
Yeah.
And teachers in our country are underpaid. So why in the world would you get into teaching?
Well, my wife is a school teacher. She's an elementary school teacher.
God bless her.
And yes, thank you. And I, would see all the joy and the fun that she has as a teacher. And, for her, it's a vocation. It's something that she's always felt a calling to. And a lot of the teachers that I've met, my favorite teachers, they have all said the same. It's a calling. It's a vocation. Yeah, we don't do it for money. We do it because we enjoy, working with people, whether it's children, fifth graders, or it's people getting a second degree or a second career. They've come out of the military and they're looking to get into cybersecurity. And the same thing applies for me is, it's these people want to learn. I have an ability to share that. And it's an opportunity to kind of educate that next generation. I'm I won't say how old I am, but I'm getting there up in the years, and I want to start, you always want to make sure you leave your mark on the world. And for me, it's like, okay, what can I do in the cybersecurity space to start helping, that next generation? And I can go and I've been talked to parents and elementary school kids about, what to post online, what you shouldn't do, cyberbullying, cyber safety with your phone. But then it's like, all right, let's take the other knowledge and educate people on how to, secure those networks, whether it's hospitals or finance or retail, whatever they're going to go into, but now start helping educate the next generation of workers while still educating, 2 generations down the road, or the next generation of people that will come into the workforce. Get them excited about cybersecurity, so they kind of consider that all the way through. And the course that I'm teaching at the college deals with identity security, so it supports that whole conversation that I have with parents. What you need to be aware of when you're online, when you're using your mobile phone, data privacy. What kind of data you're putting out there? Are you really aware that it's out there? And what can you do to, clean that up or remove it if you find something that shouldn't be there? So it's that vocation, it's that passion. It's just, it's just so much more fun. It's a lot of fun.
So that brings me to the next question. So the buzz, the headline in every single thing is we're short 3 million jobs, 2 million jobs. I've seen that number go from like 2.2 million to like 5 million or 3 million by 2021.
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be. And so I've got a statement, then I have a question.
Okay.
A friend of mine, Kevin Peterson, very, very smart guy. Me and him were talking about this a few months back, and he did some really interesting research where he said in the 70s and 80s, we had a massive nursing shortage. There were not enough nurses. And they were trying to push all these different people into the nursing field. And he looked at the statistics of how did they really solve the nursing shortage?
Right.
And believe it or not, it wasn't training. A lot of it was automation. A lot of it was outsourcing. A lot of it was new technologies that came through that helped kind of alleviate some of the tasks the nurses had to do. And in today's world, when you go into a hospital or a clinic, you probably see the nurse more than you see the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Because the nurse is doing more of the work now because of all the different things that a nurse would do 20 years ago. Right. Now it's been automated. It's been simplified. So that's my statement.
Okay.
Does that apply to cybersecurity as well? I mean, is that how you think we're going to solve this workforce shortage and talent gap in cybersecurity?
I think it's certainly one of the keys for this to be successful. You always need the people in there. We are seeing a lot more of the automation coming in, with SOAR, looking at security events and being able to use AI and kind of go through and automate, and but you still need that pilot that looks at the data. Years ago, the group that I used to work with, they used to do all the analysis of the gas turbines, and we started having artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning technology going on with that data. first to come back and tell us alarms. You know, certain sensors weren't working a certain way, so they would just go do a quick check. Okay, all right, it's this, and then move on. But they always needed the pilot, and I think we're going to get a lot more automation within security, cybersecurity. And as it comes along, you're still going to need that pilot, though, that's going to need to do that trusted verified check within whatever the data that comes back. We're always going to have people that are going to be in front of computers, so they're always going to need to be educated. I think as we go along, that education is going to be introduced a lot earlier. So by the time they get to college and they're in the workforce, hopefully they're not clicking on those links, because they'll have more of that awareness. And for me, awareness has always been one of the things that I champion, is wanting to make sure that people are aware of it. The trick to make it, you can do fantastic training programs and awareness programs, but a lot of it comes down to, do they care? The end user has to have that, what's in it for me? Do I care about the Prince of Nigeria wanting to give me, so much money if I send them $5,000, and we always joke about that one, but it's from that, people having to really properly understand why they need to take certain steps. When you buy your kid a bike, you get them a helmet and maybe some knee pads or whatever, because you want to protect your child when they're on the road if they fall down, or God forbid something happens at an intersection. So when you have your computer and your mobile device, you want to make sure that you're not clicking on those strange links. You're downloading apps from proper locations. You're not taking risks that you shouldn't do with your phone. You're securing it properly, whether it's a thumbprint, a code, or you're using your face. I can't stand it. But anyway, I would really, one of the things I've liked is you've always challenged people. And my challenge for Apple is, let me have two-factor authentication on my phone. Let me do a passcode and a thumb code, not just one or the other. So anyway, there's my soapbox. I'm done with that.
But can we realistically solve the workforce shortage with what we have today?
Can we solve it with what we had today? No, because I don't think in the 70s they could solve it with the nursing. And I'd heard about that study as well and thought it was really fascinating, because we had discussions, where have there been other shortages and how did we solve it? And ironically, with the nursing, it was the automation, bringing in other tools, bringing in people from different other work environments, bringing men in, not just making it be about women. And with cybersecurity, we're doing the same thing. We're not making it just about men. Let's get more women, get more STEM programs, and get the kids in from the STEM, more IT people, communications, marketing people, because they can help with training and awareness. The pen testing is always fun. The vulnerability assessments are always the fun thing, and a lot of the people that have been doing it for years, but trying to latch into different barrels to pull people in to be a part of it, whether it's data analysis, people working in your SOC. If you can get people that have done data analysis in other locations, other companies, other sectors, then that it can be something that we can train them to work in those security operation centers to analyze and see that kind of stuff.
So that kind of takes me to my next question, which is, cybersecurity is really a business that's constantly evolving, changing.
Sure.
And it requires, once I think unlike some trades where, you go to school, you get it,
mm-hmm.
and then you do the, annual, or, every few years you go and you get a refresher, or, you read a new thing.
Yeah.
In security, you're always constantly having to continue to learn, continue to improve.
Yep.
And there's also what I like to call the wrong people entering the industry. So some people hear about the money and they want to get security because of the money, but then they're not the right people for security, but they still go through it because universities and colleges don't really care whether or not you're qualified. They just want you to pay for your tuition, and then they'll help you with job placement. And a lot of times there's the after effect and the fallout of training the wrong person to do a job. Have you seen cases like this before, and how costly can they be?
Personally, firsthand, I haven't with regards to that, but I always, when I got my certification with my CISSP years and years ago, and the debate still goes on today. Do you need a cert? Do you need a degree? there's a book out that has that question, and 70 people answered.
Don't steal my next question though, because that's my next question.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Okay. So what was the first question? No.
So have you seen any after effects
Right,
of hiring the wrong people?
right.
Have you heard of stories where someone who shouldn't be in security went to study security, got hired,
Right.
and then there was a fallout for it? And is there any real percentages out there? Because you being an educator, I mean, so let me change the question around slightly.
Okay.
You as an educator teaching a class of cybersecurity folks on identity security.
Yeah.
If you were to look at your classes in general, what's the percentage of students in there that these guys have no business being in security?
I think a lot of it comes down to what they want to bring to it. You can have people. So what I started to say before was, when I got my certification, there was that discussion. Do you really need a certification? And because people complain, oh, I know a guy who's got a certification and he doesn't know ping from FTP. I know somebody that doesn't have a certification and he can hack your Wi-Fi network in 10 seconds. And for me, I always looked at that going, there are mechanics in the world that have certifications that are fantastic, and there are mechanics in the world that don't have certifications that are fantastic and are horrible. A lot of it comes down, in my opinion, to the person. If you've got somebody that's dedicated, that wants to learn, that wants to be in the industry, there is going to be some place for them. I've done maybe a handful of hours of coding. I've seen people say, oh, well, you've got to have coding experience to be in information security. And I'm like, okay, I've done, maybe, like I said, maybe 5 hours of coding in my life. I'm not a coder, I'm not a programmer, but there's different areas within cybersecurity, information security, because it's getting so diverse. There's so many opportunities for people to contribute to the business. If you're gonna have people, or people do discover that, okay, this isn't for me because they're not good at it or they just don't enjoy it, they're gonna go find something else. You get that in any industry that's out there. Teaching is a key one, because you get some incredibly talented teachers, and they end up leaving just because of the workforce environment, because of the culture, because they get burned out. And that's what we see even in our environment. We get people that are really good at what they do, but they get burned out. They're working, they're getting worked too hard. They're not taking time for themselves. The people that are the people that aren't as good and they're still hanging around, I think personally it'll be something that they'll just either end up working their way out, or they'll find something else that they can be good at, or that they can grow and strengthen their skill set. Because we're always learning new things. When I got in, it was focusing on industrial control systems, NERC SIP. Then I got into our corporate security office, and I was doing security awareness, security training. I ran an information security ambassador program, where I would go to all the different departments, because we had an organization of 600 and some odd thousand people. But in my area, we had several thousand, and I would go to the different departments and educate them so they could be the point person for their department. So when someone had a cybersecurity problem, come to this person, and then they would get interested into it and want to learn more. So you're gonna the good, the bad, and the ugly that are in the industry, they're gonna still always be there. They may just find their niche, or they'll go elsewhere. That's kind of, I'd say, my 2 cents on it.
So you're the head of the chapter of ISC Squared.
Yes.
That's really how you and I met. Someone from ISC Squared. I reached out to someone, and they introduced us, and that was great. And so I have a theory around certifications. I told you that on our call.
Yep.
I'm for and against them.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a logic of why I'm against them, and I have a very sensible logic of why I'm for them. You need to measure someone's knowledge, and a certification essentially dictates someone knows something basic.
Right.
In security, though, when someone knows what you know, that's an advantage for them, because if you don't know what they're doing, then you're kind of in a disadvantaged position.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, hackers can go and take certs just like a normal person to understand your course of action. Yep. So really, how effective are certifications for security? I mean, do we really need to change the way we look at certs as the industry evolves?
I think as the industry evolves, they're going to change. They have to evolve it themselves anyway. I mean, you look at the CISSP, 10 plus years ago, there was nothing of cloud, there was nothing of virtual servers in there, virtualization, and now that's evolved in there, and they've removed some of the adjusted and moved it around. But all the other certs that are out there, as you were saying, they're there so that you can have a third party attest to your skill set or what you're capable of doing. A lot of people will say, yeah, but okay, so you studied and you passed the test. If the test can be something where it's applying the information, that way, yeah, it, but now apply it in this environment and show. Other times there's been, it would be great if a certificate, and there's one of them that's out there that you have to do hands-on exercises. You have to show how you secure or how you exploit a particular vulnerability or a set of systems, and those certifications are really, becoming, you have one of those and that you've proven how well you're knowledgeable of the material. But I think the college, now that there's a lot more colleges having degrees in cybersecurity, that's going to be kind of your first step. You come out, you have your degree. If you can show the hands-on projects that you've done, you've shown the coding that you've done, you've shown, if you've gotten certs out of there, you can come out of college because you've had hands-on experience. You can now come out and have several of the certifications already, so you can get into that work environment.
Do you really think colleges, I mean, to me, it's funny because colleges work on a 2 or 4 year programs.
Mm-hmm.
And some people, I get why they do it from a business standpoint.
Right.
They want you paying them for 2 to 4 years.
Sure.
But in security, it almost feels like you can probably get your cert and get the education done in 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks in a lot of cases. Meaning, if you just dedicate a year of just studying in security and going through, starting at Security Plus and moving your way through to a CISA or whatever, not going to a CISSP, obviously, because the criteria to getting one of those,
right.
There's you got to be somewhere for a period of time to get a CISSP. But it almost feels like it would be probably more cost effective and more of an effective education piece for people wanting to go into security rather than doing the traditional 2 or 4 year program. And I back that up by saying I've visited a lot of universities that have cybersecurity programs, that have met with a lot of directors that are trying to do curriculum development. And the one thing I've always said is, don't make something longer than it really should be. But again, that's falling on deaf ears because people want to, universities at the end of the day want to make money.
Sure.
Do you feel like there's going to be a bigger aftermarket for security that's really going to kind of overtake the traditional university system? Or do you feel like the traditional university system will still be a dominant cybersecurity kind of path going forward?
Yeah, because you're, going back to what you were saying about, 8 weeks, you could sit. I mean, you can take a boot camp for 1 week and sit and, get the experience and take the test at the end. But what does that really gain you? Unless you're continually learning or moving forward and improving on your craft, it's not going to be. It's just going to be a cert, because when you have to sit down and have a conversation with an interviewer and you can't answer the questions because you can't remember what you just tested on or whatever else, it's going to be problematic. But with the universities, when you look at engineers and you look at doctors and you look at all the other careers, even accountants have to go to school and get a degree in accounting before they can go sit for their CPA.
Right.
Maybe they don't, but they got to have the years of experience. And I think with our field, in certain aspects, you're going to have areas where you're going to want a 2-year or 4-year college degree, because that's going to, for me, I think is going to be in line with a lot of the different certs. Now, granted, they're getting them when they're in college, but if they can get that 4-year degree and then several years down the road, if they're liking the managerial track, they can do a CISSP or a CISM, the CISM. There may even be more certifications that come out because the other ones aren't able to compete or aren't as good as they used to be. Because before they work at the colleges, we didn't have any certifications. You could come in and go, yeah, I can boot up Kali Linux and I can pen test against this. But if there's no proof of that or way to validate that, so that's where a lot of the the certs started out. But I think now, as more and more colleges, if we can get more people that have a degree, I think that's only going to help the industry in the long run. but we're going to still have the people that don't go to college and are successful, because they have that passion, they have that drive where they can come out and they have a skill set, and they have the ability to start their own company and make that company successful. Microsoft, Dell, that's how they all start, building computers and software. But with cybersecurity, we've got people that have come out of the military, formed their own companies, with or without a cert, and have been able to been extremely successful. So right. A lot of it is going to come from that passion.
So you bring up a really good point, which is the military, as kind of an accelerating point into cyber, which, when you look at, for example, Israel, which has a very, very thriving cybersecurity industry,
right?
You notice that most of the companies you go to, when you're looking at the bio of the founders, military. Yep. A lot of them are military. Very few come from the private sector.
Right.
And I feel like that's also a challenge here. Is we have our military folks aren't really inclined to go out and start a company. The reason for it is because we have a thriving defense contractor industry that, a year before you're set to leave, they're already recruiting you. They've got a contract in front of you. They're promising you double or triple of what you were earning in service. Yeah. And so you're not really motivated when you leave the service to go out and be an entrepreneur.
Right.
Because part of it is you're used to that secure income, that government benefit package. Right. And, the big organizations, the Lockheeds, the Boos, those guys, they've got an internal track, and people coming into the service, and they're kind of recruiting them in. So we end up with, I think, entrepreneurs and people who start in security that come from the private sector.
Right. Yeah.
And the technology sector, but they're not really addressing the defense sector. So, you're hiring the guy that was 20 years in the NSA or in one of the federal agencies to come on board and kind of be your insider government person, able to identify his real set capabilities. Because he's coming from the NSA, there's no real way to verify what he really did in the NSA.
Right.
Right. And I've seen that as well. Whereas I think in Israel and other countries I've been to, whether it be in Europe and Asia, you see the entrepreneurs in security almost exclusively, the very successful companies come from the military. I mean, when you think of some of the larger companies today that are in the marketplace, the Checkpoints, the Palo Altos, you look at Gil Schwed, the guy was an exclusive unit in the military.
Right.
In Israel, same thing with Palo Alto, same thing with a lot of those companies that started.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's one of those where I go, it'd be very interesting to see how that evolves here in the US if the military takes a more proactive approach in a security to try and create an internal entrepreneurship and incubator program in the service to help facilitate the growth and the security of the industry. Because, we started talking about ICS, and I think one of those classic things in ICS is getting the military to start developing tools within their own entrepreneurial, kind of methods and really securing the infrastructure.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yep.
So that was my rant.
Okay. Hashtag.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah, okay.
What tips would you tell someone who's looking to start a career in cybersecurity? What would you, we kind of spoken about, the right and wrong people going into security.
Right.
But someone who's listening now, who's considering a cybersecurity career, what would you tell them?
And I have this happen to me on a daily basis. I'm always meeting people. They're like, "Oh, you're in cybersecurity. Oh, how'd you get in?" And then you tell them the story. And, I'm thinking about joining, and it's like, fantastic, excellent. And I think for me, a lot of it is if you're considering joining, do it because you find it interesting. Come in and learn as much as you can. I mean, when I got into this 10 plus years ago, it was looking at training and awareness, looking at pen testing, looking at the coding aspect, looking at asset identification, learning about all the different standards that are out there. You want to have that passion to learn as much as you can and do as much, because there is something for everybody within this environment. The other tip is always, once you get in, start networking, start meeting other people that are working in your industry. There is so much work to go around. It's not like we have to be cutthroat about, wanting to get the particular job or whatever else. Network by going to B-side conferences, which are the best ones, especially if you're a student, because most of the B-sides, if not all of them, you get in for free if you're a student. Well, at least here in Orlando, shameless plug. But whether you go to B-sides, they are significantly cheaper because it's a 1 or 2 day event. If you can find local conferences in your area, to go to those, the RSAs, the DEF CONs, the Black Hats, those are the biggies. Those are the ones that you literally will feel like consumed and, just kind of spit back out onto the curb. Speaking from not any personal experience, I'm going for my first time this year, so I'm excited to go. But those are the big ones that I know that have tens of thousands of people in attendance. If you can go to a conference that's got a couple hundred people or 500 or 1,000 people, you get a good opportunity to network. Networking at security chapters, whether it's ISACA, whether it's ISSA, whether it's ISC squared, whether it's some sort of other tech group that you have through meetups. Just get out into the community and start meeting other people in your area, to build that network of people that you know. So when you do end up going to conferences, it's like, hey, how's it going? And you catch up. And then constantly looking to keep yourself learning, constantly keep educating. For me, my number one resource for keeping up with what's going on in the world is Twitter. I follow a lot of people on Twitter, see a lot of articles. When the whole last the Blue Keep RDP vulnerability came out, that was in that whole patch of Microsoft's updates, but I didn't look through those. It was because somebody wrote an article about the exploit and the worm capability, and so click that link and off you go, and you're reading articles. But for me, learning all the time through Twitter. There's a variety of different books that are out there that you can read on a regular basis and go through, but just to constantly keep learning too.
And final question before we end our discussion today is, one of the key aspects of security I always say is best practices, because best practices tend to be the best way to share knowledge. A lot of times, the discussion, like I said at the very beginning, is led by the noise in the industry, the people who are trying to sell stuff, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's great products out there. Don't get me wrong with it, but I always feel like when the solution is buying something, that's not always the right solution.
Right.
What are some of the best practices that you kind of do, maybe 2 or 3 that you can share with some of the cybersecurity practitioners that talk about, having a better security posture or being a bit more secure? What are some of the things that you do, could be from the basic to maybe a little bit more advanced, that you can share with some of our listeners and viewers?
So of my best practices that I do. Okay.
You do. You personally.
Me personally do. Okay. That's a good question. I think from the, one of the things that I've kind of really started to get a stronger focus on is the privacy aspects, getting a strong understanding of what are you sharing out there. I had the pleasure of doing a segment a couple of years ago, and the last question they asked me was, what's one thing somebody can do on a regular basis? And I said, Google yourself, make sure you're going through and being aware. And so for me, not only for me, but my family is starting to look more at the privacy aspects and, and getting a strong understanding of what information is out there. That when you can really delve deep, I mean, the amount of, through OSINT, the amount of information that's out there about you. Of course, I'm going to sure Google's going to get a big hit on my name now. But I think another best practice is keeping it, and I said it already, is keeping educated, keeping up with, my Twitter feed, I've got notifications turned on a whole slew of people, because what they tweet is always good information. It's always good to read and see what they're doing. And every day I'm reading dozen articles. Warren Buffett says, spend an hour a day reading. Well, it doesn't have to actually be a book. It can be your Twitter feed, which you have to be careful because you get sucked in. But yeah, keeping the education and keeping learning in that aspect. And then the other best practice is making sure that you can disconnect from the work. I know a lot of people do get burned out. A lot of people go 16, 14-hour days working because of the issues, because their companies may not have it, or that they enjoy it so much. but make sure that, you know, there's time for your family. I know it's a little sentimental, it might be a little soft, but for me, it's family's a big thing. And I'm, you know, I do the cybersecurity stuff because I love it. It's fun. It pays the bills. But it also allows me the opportunity to be able to spend time with my family and do some of the other passions that I have another hobby, photography, travel, whatever. But you want to make sure you have those. So you keep
all the great pictures behind you.
Oh, those, yeah, I wish I took those. No, those are all, that's all artwork. But yeah, no, my artwork, my photography pictures are hanging out in the main part of the house. So,
so I kind of want to end on this. You brought up a really excellent point when it comes to privacy and data.
Yeah.
And so I have another podcast called Goodbye Privacy.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Which I don't know if you knew. Our hashtag is data cartels.
Okay.
And we one of the things I highlight is how free data ends up being a catalyst for so much more. And it's really interesting because I'm working on a study now, and for one of our next episodes, I just did one on data brokers.
Okay. Yeah.
Where we spoke of how data brokers is a $200 billion a year industry that collect data for free, make $200 billion a year off of it, and they sell that data with really no vetting, no repercussion, because there isn't one. I think Vermont's the only state that has any sort of data broker regulation, and the only regulation they have in place is that if you're a data broker that's collecting data on Vermont residents, you have to register with the Secretary of State.
Great.
And there's no limitation to it. And one of the things I'm actually researching now at the moment is how hackers can actually use those to create a better social engineering attack on security folks. So how can I get you, James, to succumb to my attack on your organizations? And instead of tackling the secretary that's panicked and, you know, the executive assistant, the CFO, target the security guy with a very good social engineered data because I have it, and launch an attack that way. Do you feel like, and I kind of want to wrap up on this, but do you feel like data, the fact that there's so much data of ours out there, the fact that we don't really manage our privacy, the fact that we don't really have a way to manage our privacy, we just posted an infographic on Twitter that you can see at the CyberHub Engage page, where we show you, I think, the top 10 data brokers allow you to opt out. And when you opt out, you pay money to opt out. So they're collecting your data for free, but they're charging you money to opt out.
Something wrong with that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, do you feel like that's something that we should be starting to address, not only from a personal level, but also from a legislative piece?
Yeah, that was kind of my first thought, was there needs to be some legislation on this to bring forward. I mean, you know, our society is a great society, and you can come up with an idea and help make money off of it. But with data privacy, you know, selling that kind of information, there's going to need to be some sort of legislation, because a lot more people are going to become a lot more aware of what information's out there. I mean, whether it's parents sharing information about their kids because they're growing up, you know, pretty well their whole life of growing up is all on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever social media platform. The fact that with more identity thefts are going on, and you can launch different attacks based on whether you go after that executive or their secretary or their children, because it's the children that have the profiles. You may even start having a business or people that are working to help get you off the net. You know, try to help you remove all that information that's out there, because there is so much that's out there, not only in social media, but with other companies that you know, through a data breach, it's been collected and sold off, and now it's out there. You know, short of having to change your name and your social security number, you know, what's going to need to be done. You know, we're going to need something from legislation, but they're going to need experts to be able to tell them what they need to do, because they don't know. It's kind of like the whole social media regulation. It's like, we need to have this done. The FCC with the robocalling, you know, they're finally getting the experts in to kind of create that. And so with the data privacy aspects, we're going to need those data privacy experts to be on Capitol Hill to lobby to get more data privacy laws. You know, we've got California working on one, GDPR, but we need legislation, and it's not an easy thing to do. Otherwise, I guess they would have done it by now. But that kind of thing is what needs to come down the line to to
Well,
help.
it's not easy to do because you have industries that make hundreds of billions of dollars off
Right. Selling all
that have lobbyists on the Hill lobbying
against it. Yeah.
for the lack of regulation, saying you don't really need it. If people want, we give them the opportunity to already opt out,
Right.
even though they charge you $3 to $10 to opt out from getting your information.
Yeah.
And one of the really interesting GDPR statistics was, if you look at the complaints in the first year of GDPR, it was 144,000 complaints that were lodged for privacy violation or disputes within local authorities within the EU.
Right.
When you think of the 500 million people that live in the EU, 144,000 complaints, that's 0.0002 of the population.
Yeah, barely anything.
Yeah, that's not even a speck on a graph.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and I think that's the other challenge, is most people are oblivious to the fact that their data is being used in a way, and that kind of goes back to election security and the fact of how the Russians were able to manipulate and create those narratives, whether it would have been, against Trump or for Trump or for whoever. It's really easy to build demographics when you have all that data readily available online.
Yep.
And you can't really, as much as people want to blame the social media networks, you can't really blame them, because
our election information's out there. You've got public records, that's information that's out there. Yeah, there's a lot of data that's out there that needs to be restricted. Yeah.
Right. And it's not at the moment. Well, you and I can keep this conversation going. I think what I'd like to do is do another episode where you and I talk about that privacy and election and election security. I think that's a great topic. That's going to become more and more important as we head into the election cycle.
Yeah.
With President Trump, I think he's declaring his re-election campaign in Orlando in 8 days.
And you know what? I won't be here. I'm on vacation. I leave on Wednesday. I won't be even in the country.
That's awesome. Well, have a great vacation. Enjoy your time. James, thanks for being on the show. I really do appreciate it. So if you're listening and watching, James McQuiggan with Siemens Gamesa, got it right, Product and Solution Security Officer. This was a great episode. James, again, thanks for being on. I really do appreciate it. For those listening, we thank you so much for listening on the show. Make sure you're subscribing to get alerts of all of our new episodes. We do post new content every single day, and every single day on our YouTube channel and social media channels, and once a week on our podcast channels. And you can find us on any of your favorite podcast platforms. That's it for today's episode. James, again, thank you so much for being on. My name's James Azar. Thanks for listening. That's it for today. Micah, we are out.